Hey everyone, welcome to the webinar. This is why and how to embed web content into your mobile apps. My name is Matt Netkow, and I am head of product marketing here at Ionic. And with me is Josh Thomas. Hey Josh, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks, Matt. Happy to be
Awesome,
here.
awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited. Josh is our product manager for Ionic Portals, the web content delivery tool we're going to be talking about today for your native apps. I'm very excited. He's going to be here giving us a great live demo, so stick around. We've got an action-packed agenda today. We're going to be talking about all things native mobile apps, talking about the benefits and challenges of building with them at scale, the secret to tackling those mobile challenges, which include embedding web content and all things about how and why you want to do that. Then we're going to unveil Ionic Portals, a newer product for us that makes this process of embedding web content into your native apps incredibly easy. And then Josh here is going to do a live demo. I'm really excited about that. And then we'll have live Q&A at the very end. But on the right-hand side, you can you can drop in any questions at any time throughout the whole presentation, and we will get to them. So definitely leave those. We will stick around for that. And with that, I'm going to go full screen and let's get to it. So for those of you that are perhaps not as much aware of who Ionic is and what we do, just a brief quick note and then we'll get right to it. So Ionic is the leading cross-platform developer solution for building all different types of apps at scale. We are a web-first approach. So we're all about enabling web developers to use their skills to build for, of course, the web, mobile, desktop, and beyond. So it's all about empowering web developers to do more with the skills that they have. So of course, the web-first approach is using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build those applications. Basically, the fundamentals of the web. Nothing proprietary on that front. And then because we've been around for a number of years and building up all of our this approach of using the web to build really killer apps, we've got millions of developers worldwide using the Ionic platform and all of our open source and enterprise technology. And we're powering over 15% of apps in the app stores. So that's pretty incredible. And that's not to mention the thousands upon thousands of internal apps in companies that are running today as well. So millions of apps in the stores and distributed around the world. And as a result, because of this deep experience with the web and our technologies, we've become really the leader in enterprise app development, those using web developers and native developers to build real, excellent, and just really well thought out apps. So you'll probably recognize a lot of these logos of companies that are customers, and you'll see the variety there. And that's because Ionic works great for any industry, whether retail, manufacturing, banking, insurance, the whole gamut. There's a place for you with Ionic. So yeah, come check us out, and let's get back to our main content for today. All right, so we are talking about how the benefits and challenges now of building native mobile apps, your mission critical applications, and why we build with native. So a little bit of this is just a brief recap of why native is so great, right? Well, of course, the benefits of native and using iOS and Android native technologies are plentiful, right? First, you have performance benefits, right? You're using the building blocks, the software development kits that Apple and Google have developed for their specific mobile platforms. So they're the best in class. They're created by the device creators and the operating system developers at those companies to be the best in class and give you the best performance right out of the box. And that's, of course, really important if you're building mission critical apps for your business. Users expect a high level of performance and interactivity today. Additionally, because you're using these two and going the native route, you've got rich native libraries that are included in these SDKs for free, essentially, out of the box. And additionally, as soon as they launch new features or new betas, you get access to them immediately. There's no wait time. You're always on top of the latest and greatest innovative features for mobile that these providers bring to you. And also because you're using their platforms, you have less third-party dependencies to integrate into your app. You can still do that, of course, to extend them and different plugins, different native code, but you can get very far, if not build a complete, quite amazing app with just the native SDKs that you get out of the box. However, there's some challenges with native that we've seen on our side over the years, working with hundreds of customers, and from research like with Forrester, Gartner, et cetera, these companies that study these trends. And the reality is that despite these advances and all the great tooling that native apps give you, we're finding in Forrester's finding that the average enterprise team ships less than 4 times a year, 4 times, like basically once a quarter, right? Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but not enough really to compete with today's market where we have releases going out daily for some of the best companies in the world. They're shipping incredibly fast. And the reason behind this is several, right? What are some of these native challenges we run into? Well, the first one is talent scarcity. It is highly competitive to find great iOS and Android engineers because there's simply less of them. They're harder to learn, take a lot of investment on the developer side to get really great at. And so from surveys like Stack Overflow and other sources, we know that 7% or so of all the developers in the world are native developers, compared to 10x that of web developers and developers working on back-end technologies and all different types of different stacks. So it is really difficult to find great talent on that side. Additionally, there's higher costs involved, not only because of supply and demand there for actual salaries for hiring them as well, but the actual costs of building different separate code bases, right? You have a web code base, you end up with an iOS and an Android code base, and there's little to no code reuse there. So you have not only those code bases to maintain, but separate teams of people to hire, manage, and scale up. So that all translates to a lot of money. Next, we have longer development cycles that all builds on top of this, which is, again, because you have those 3 different platforms you're building, they're going to get out of sync. You know, you can plan and plan and plan and try to get your roadmaps lining up. But the reality of working with different teams at different skill levels and different complexity of each platform is, you know, you're going to end up with some users that are ahead on different platforms, some that are behind. So that can be in a world where everyone expects to move seamlessly between devices, that can be a little frustrating for your end users if they don't always have the same features in parity with each other. So let's take a look at this. You know, how do successful teams tackle these mobile development challenges, right? Because clearly there's lots of innovative experts out there and big companies that we look up to that have figured this out somehow, right? Well, the answer here is people and technology, combining those two. And how we do that is on the people side, using our web development team to get the most out of our development cycles and use their skills to build for mobile. And then on the technology side, we have these things called web views that we can use to embed web content into our app. So we're going to dig into that now. So the first thing we all know, you know, we kind of gave an overview of web development, at least from the Ionic perspective, right? It's using the building blocks of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But what about web views? What just briefly are they, right? Well, think of them as native web browser components. They're embeddable browsers that can be used inside of a native app. And they're built by Apple and Google. They're native components as a result. And we use them to display internal and external web content. External content being pointing at a URL on a web server, and internal with that approach being embedding the actual application within that native app. They are widely used in mobile app development. So as we're going to see in a second here, there are thousands and thousands of companies doing this approach. Not always talked about, though, and not always obvious, as we'll see, to our end users, but it is very popular approach to using and developing much faster. On iOS and Android, you have WK WebView. That's the name of the component, and just WebView on Android. So how do we, let's look at the benefits of using web developers and really web technology to unlock faster development for your native mobile apps. Why and what this actually means and things like that. So the first one is solving that talent gap. We saw how honestly abysmal those hiring numbers are, and the availability of finding great native talent is just incredibly challenging, right? So the difficulty is we're without being able to hire, we can't ship the features we want. We can't find the talent that we want. So why not use our web development team, right? You all have websites, internal and perhaps external web apps that your company has to build and maintain. And you've got talented developers behind that, web developers. So what's great about using web developers is it's not only great for their career and being able to build for new platforms, but it's great for the business too, because you can get more mileage out of their skills. Additionally, web developers are great at responsive design and building for separate screens. So moving to mobile from that perspective is not really a challenge for them, because they've likely, if they're building modern web apps and have been for a while, they've had to implement designs that work on smaller screens like our tablets and phones, right? So that's one major aspect that they can cover for us. Additionally, with using web development and web technology is being able to maintain feature parity between the web and mobile, one of our other native dev challenges we talked about. So not only are you able to ship faster, but you can keep your features in parity with each other so that your users are happy and can move seamlessly between web and mobile experiences. And finally, it allows your web and native teams to work in parallel. They don't have to step on each other's toes. They can work on separate features or work together on similar ones that need to exchange data or interact with each other, ultimately speeding up your development time because they're not blocked by each other or waiting on each other. And ultimately, what this means is web developers can deliver amazing experiences on mobile. For example, there's the ability these days to access any native device feature, right? So the camera, geolocation, haptics, biometrics, all these types of things are available to the web views and web developers. So they can take advantage of that when building really cool experiences. Additionally, you can still seamlessly integrate native mobile components like navigation and data and features. We'll see some of these examples in a minute here with our demo. And ultimately, and perhaps what most matters, is the user experience, which is probably what you're wondering about. If you had transitions between native and web that looked very janky or honestly quite obvious, that would not be so great, right? You want this to be imperceptible to users, and they are. You can transition between different screens and different experiences seamlessly. So I understand if you're a little bit skeptical. I definitely would be and was at first when I was getting into this. So let's take a look at actually who is doing these approaches, who is embedding web content today. If you're not sold on it, then I totally understand, but let's look at that. Well, the answer is everyone is. All of these popular large enterprises, especially, and smaller companies too, but especially larger companies that have dozens of apps to maintain, flagship apps, internal apps, they need to move fast. So they use this embedded web content approach. A lot of companies, and we'll kind of dig into some details, like Instacart, Netflix, Nike sneaker app, Apple Music, they're all using web views to accelerate their app development. Let's look at some exact examples. I love kind of talking through this and showing this off. So the first one, we've got a number of examples here. The first one is Apple Music. So I love this example because they're really leveraging the best of web and native together. So they use, for the native side, they've got native tab bars at the bottom for browsing, listening, searching. And the song player controls are all native too, which makes sense because you have those songs downloaded to your device. You want them to be really responsive and use the best of the device API. So why not? They've implemented that as native. And then the rest of the content, like on the Browse tab here, when you're searching for music to buy or add to your playlist in this example, are web-based. So they can update this seamlessly and on demand as different hits change, as playlists change that they want to recommend to you, especially dynamically, as well as ads at the top for Apple Music or other types of things. Those are web-based. So really great example of combining both web and native. Another one is Netflix. So they use a really great approach, very common, that we see where they're serving their help section, all of their help documentation from that lives at help.netflix.com. So it's entirely web-based content. It's all just from their website, a portion of it, and they're embedding it into the native app. So what's great about this is when they probably have this content behind a content management system, and I'm sure their customer success, their customer support team maintains this. And so as we know, with either documentation or help or FAQs, that info changes all the time. I mean, look at this example of updating your app on iOS 13 and higher, 12, like all that. They're constantly going to have to be making changes to this. So it doesn't make sense to make this pure native because one, they already have it existing on the web at help.netflix.com. And to keep this updated, even perhaps daily, as their product changes or new features come out, they want to be able to add new Q&A questions really fast, right? And react to their was this article helpful section and questionnaire, right? So by embedding this, they're able to make those changes on their own terms. And then every app user essentially gets this for free. You don't have to update the app from the App Store. They always have the latest and greatest content. So we see this a lot with help pages, FAQs, documentation inside of native mobile apps. And then they're using native navigation at the top to go back and forth, just give that seamless transition. So again, you really can't tell that it's what's native and what's web. And ultimately, it doesn't matter because you can navigate within that help section, the help home there, or go back within to other screens within the native app itself. Yet another example is Amazon. So a very similar approach. They're serving a lot of Amazon.com content remotely, which again makes sense. They started in an era decades ago before mobile devices. So they have this responsive content, their product catalog, an entire shopping experience, which you can imagine built for the web is incredibly complex, right? So to recreate that on mobile would just be, even for a company, billion, trillion dollar company, would be astronomical for costs. So why do that when you can embed the web content, right? And so what they're doing here is very similar. It's all web-based content for your shopping and recommendations. And you still have that native navigation at the top where the search bar can be used to search for products. And then other native-based features that just make more sense for them to be implemented in native are that barcode scanner on the upper right, and then the microphone for connecting to your phone's speaker and driving search results from that. So another great example is Amazon there. And then finally, we have Disney World, Disneyland, the My Disney Experience app that all visitors use when they're attending the parks. And again, this one is mostly web content in very key sections of the app, oftentimes requested from a CDN. So again, high performance, can load very quickly all around the world when you use a content delivery network like that. And also using native navigation on the bottom to ensure that you get those seamless transitions as you navigate through the app. Okay, so how are these companies creating these experiences with the web today? What's their secret sauce? How are they doing this? Let's take a look at that. Well, what they're doing is building on top of the stock web views that Android and iOS give you, that WK web view and web view on Android, right? So this works, but here's the challenge though. There's a lot of gotchas with this. The issues are starting with the fact that only low-level APIs are exposed. So these companies, despite their engineering talent and the money they can throw at this problem, are spending a lot of this and investing a lot of engineering time building up and building on top of these basic building blocks. To really create these advanced experiences for users takes a lot of work. Here's just some of the things that they have to do. Communication between the web and native layer is a big part of that. They have to create that implementation, which means sending data back and forth, handling authentication and cookies, all those types of things. Managing the native elements like navigation and load and things like that, permission dialog boxes all have to be implemented and managed. Same with errors and permission handling, right? Reacting like what happens when something doesn't load right on the web or native or both. Lots of corner cases there. And then not to mention, well, the updating of those web experiences. So you can have multiple web apps or little experiences embedded within that app, but how do you keep all of those updated in a dynamic fashion? The traditional way would be going through App Store reviews, which can take several days if you need to update them. So they'd have to build mechanisms to point to a server or load that remotely to keep apps up to date. So all of that has to be implemented on top of these stock web views. So really, the reality of DIY solutions like these companies are doing, despite having the talent and the cost and the bandwidth to do it, are really difficult to work with. And really, if we think about it, it's taking time away from their core competencies. Amazon wants to innovate and focus on making their shopping experience really seamless, not building these types of building blocks on top of web views. So these can be really time consuming and costly to maintain because, as we know, we get at least one iOS and Android release every year. So there's bugs, there's new features to integrate. They'll have to make sure that these custom web view implementations are kept up to date and don't break with these new iOS and Android versions. On top of security risks and vulnerabilities, they have to make sure that they're sending data, passing data correctly. They have to make sure that their users' data can't be compromised by using web views or on the native layer. And additionally, there's lack of native feature access from the web. You can use the standard web APIs like the camera to integrate these, but there's some user experience pieces that really have to be built in order to provide a really great experience. Some of the building blocks from the web are also very low level and basic and not up to par with what users expect today. And finally, there aren't any granular controls for collaboration between the native and web team. The native team is going to want to make sure that what the web team is working on is sandboxed and the pages of the app are appropriate for what they're set to do and set to collaborate on. So with this, what I'm really excited to talk about next with Josh here is Ionic Portals, which is our approach at solving not only the stock web view challenge, but also moving and building apps at scale and doing it in a sane way that helps your web and native developers collaborate better. So we're hoping with this to allow you to avoid the hassle of having to build on top of the stock web views and so much more with all those challenges I talked about. So what exactly is Ionic Portals? Well, it's a free, secure, and extensible web view component for your native mobile apps. And it allows you to bring your web experiences to mobile by embedding them within your iOS and Android apps. There's no compromise here to the experiences you can build. You get full access to native components, APIs, device APIs like the camera and geolocation, all those cool features that are mobile only. It's safe and secure. We have security experts and mobile experts that are always making sure that we are following Apple and Google's guidelines to provide you with a great experience that's also safe for your users' data. And we allow you to have granular control over which sections of the app, as well as which native features the web developers can access. Also, we've got, as we'll kind of see in a little bit, we've got an upcoming feature called Live Updates, which allows you to update your web-based content, images, and more, and allow you to do that by bypassing the App Store review process, which is absolutely allowed and within their terms of service, but it saves you a lot of time when you have critical bugs and other issues, or maybe even A/B tests that you want to run and you want to see changes daily. You can get those updates out really fast. And one of the things that Ionic is really well known for is our enterprise support, advisory, and training services, something that you just don't get from Google, Facebook, or some of these other vendors that put out other cross-platform technology. This kind of cross-platform approach is 100% what our business is focused on, with hundreds of customers building these types of apps, and we have a unique edge there with our ability to support them, since we have our mobile experts and security experts on hand to help with everything. So let's take a brief look at how this process works of integrating a portal, and then Josh is going to show it live in a real app. So first is, of course, you build your web-based mobile experience. You have those apps already, most likely, or you custom tailor them. Maybe you have a brand new experience you want to build for your native mobile app. You can do that, but if you have an existing application or micro app that you want to build and bring into a native mobile app, then you can do that. One example that we're going to see is a checkout flow from an e-commerce site. That makes sense, right? You have your customer's address data. You have the checkout process of accepting payments on your core web app. Why not bring that? Why reinvent that? And why rebuild that when you could just embed that into your native mobile app, right? The second step is embedding that web app into your existing native mobile app, right? And again, it's going to use our secure native web view, the Portals product, to do that. You get full access to your native features and native navigation and controls as well. So you have lots and lots of customization and configuration you can do on this front to deliver a great experience. Then finally, again, I mentioned controlling access to different areas of the app that the web team can work on. So the native team still maintains control on that front, and they can decide which features, data, and parts of the app that can be accessed. So definitely a collaborative effort there, but provide some guardrails to make sure that the right sections of the app are being worked on. And ultimately, it's your users that benefit from this approach and this product. They can experience these web-based experiences like any other native app at the end of the day, because Portals offers a seamless integration between native and web. As we saw with some of those company examples, you can't notice a difference between transitioning between the native and web portions. You get native feature access and, of course, offline capabilities out of the box because you're embedding that web content within the native app right away. And most importantly, as we said, you want the experience of going back and forth between web and native to be invisible. It can't be jarring, and it's not going to be. The context switching is imperceptible to users, and they're just going to use their app like any other native app, and your team benefits from speed and delivery innovations there. All right. So Josh, it's your time. He is going to talk about adding a web-based checkout experience to an existing native e-commerce app. So all of this that he's showing off today is free and open source. Here's the GitHub link to the repository that he's going to be talking about. So let us switch over to you. And all right, Josh, when you're ready, take over.
Ready to go. So at Ionic, we created a demo application to help organizations understand and adopt portals. And I'm going to walk through the scenario for its usage. We have a native application here that's built for iOS using Swift, and we created it as an e-commerce app so that our customers could purchase swag from the Ionic store. Unfortunately, this isn't a real store, so you can't buy that capacitor snapback hat. But let's take a look at the app anyway. So here we have 3 tabs. In the first one, it's a list of products. We can dig into products and read about the details, or we could get assistance on the particular product. We have a cart tab, and we can check out. And we also have profile tab. So as we were building this application, one of the things we identified is that maintaining and building this checkout process on the many different platforms that we have isn't really something that we want to keep going or maintain. It's hard enough to build it, but maintaining it in iOS, Android, and web wasn't something that we wanted to take on. So we decided to look at the web experience that already existed and make use of that. But using a stock web view leaves a lot to be desired. And we wanted to share the data and create a great user experience. So let's take a look and see how we accomplish this with portals. First, we're going to take a look at the native code that was required in order to do this. First thing we're going to do is add portals to our application. So here you can see we're describing a portal. We're giving it the name of checkout, and we're identifying the location on the device, the folder in particular, where the web application lives. And if you were to look at this folder, it's going to contain HTML, CSS, JS, and whatever resources are required to render that web app. So after we've added the portal, we need to define where the portal lives. And in this case, when I click checkout, it's actually showing a sheet modal over the top. So this web view is within the checkout view controller. So let's look at the checkout view controller to see how we can define the portal. Portal manager.get portal by name, which is checkout, which is what we defined here. And then we set up initial context. Initial context for a portal is the information that's available to the web application before the first render occurs. So if you need any information right away, you can make it available. We do a little more setup here for that portal web view. And then we're also making use of a plugin. In this case, it's the Portals plugin. And we're subscribing to a dismiss event. So a plugin is a way of keeping a consolidated functionality of your native application and exposing it to your web views. So in this case, anytime a web view were to throw an event that was dismiss, this plugin would look for that event and then map it to the corresponding function here in this checkout view controller. And here we can see exactly what it's doing. It's going to dismiss. So if I click cancel, you can see that it dismissed the view. And that's because this dismiss event was thrown from the Portals plugin. Now, there's other plugins you can create as well. So the Portals plugin is just the one that we provide out of the box. But for this particular application, we needed a little more functionality. And that's why we created the Shop API plugin. And here you can see within the Shop API plugin, there's additional information and exposed functionality to the Portals-based web views. Get cart to gather information about what's in the cart. Get user details in order to get the delivery addresses and the payment information. And then checkout result so that we can call that whenever we've completed a checkout and clear out the cart. So now you've got a high-level understanding of how you can define a portal and expose functionality from the native perspective. But let's take a look from the web side. So this is a single-page app you can see here in the browser that was built using Ionic components and React. Not that you need to use React and Ionic for your web content, but it does make for a pretty great experience. You can see the development for this was done using a browser and VS Code, but obviously your web team can use whatever tools they're most familiar with. So first thing we're going to do is take a look at this page that we're looking at right now, the checkout page. And this checkout page depends on a couple pieces of information, cart and user. Cart obviously being the total and user having delivery addresses and payment information. But this view is also making use of the Portals plugin. So let's see how we're using this particular plugin. It's wired up to the cancel button. So if I were to click cancel within the application, you can see that it's publishing a dismiss event. Let's go back and look at the native code for this. Here in the view controller, we subscribe to the dismiss event, and then we make the view go away based on that. So here, if I click dismiss, it's dismissing the overall view. But that wasn't the only plugin that we're using here. We're also gathering the cart and user details, and we're using context for this within React. And this information is coming from a data provider. So let's look at the data provider. And here we're gathering user details and cart information. And we're also prompting for the checkout. Here you can see for get user details, it's using shop API.get user details. And for get cart, it's using shop API.get cart. Now, it looks as though this is calling directly into another JavaScript library. But what's actually happening is that these requests are proxied through the portal into the native application so that the native application can return these results to the web view. Here we can see, here's the web implementation of the Shop API plugin. And this is all using TypeScript so that web developers can know exactly the structure of information that's being returned and the functionality that's exposed. Now, you might have noticed based on this naming convention and recognized it from the Shop API plugin from native. Let's go back and look at it. You can see here the names are the same. Get cart, get user details, and checkout result. So whenever get cart is called, it's returning the data from native back down through the portal to the web application. So now that we've seen how you can interact from web to native, let's go back to the native application again and just walk through this step by step. First thing I did was set up my portal. I defined where it lived. I set it up within my checkout view controller. So I click checkout. It shows the checkout view controller in a sheet modal in this case. And then I can click cancel, which is a web-based button that goes back and cancels the view and tells the native application to dismiss the modal. Or I can complete the checkout and place my order. But let's make sure. Let's grab an extra hat here because I think Matt needs one. We place our order, dismisses, and goes away. So as we're looking at this application, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but within the app delegate, we actually defined 3 different portals, not just the checkout. And that's because this application has just more than just one portal being used. We have one for checkout, help, and the user profile. But I can tell you, but let me prove it to you. And that's using another tool we have here called Inspect. Inspect allows me to look at an active native application and highlight the web views that are active. So let's go back here, choose a product, go to help. And you can see here, highlighted in blue is the web content. And this is where the portal exists. As I click back, it's going back to the previous page. We already know about the one for checkout, but let's look at it anyway. So I click checkout, it opens the sheet modal, and you can see here, everything within that sheet modal is a web view. And the last one that you probably didn't notice is the profile page. This is also a web view. And I can prove it. We're looking at the web content right now and inspecting this. And this is what we mean by this seamless integration, that it's difficult for you to identify where web exists and where native exists. And you can go back and forth between them within your native applications and your users can't tell. And because you're creating this nice user experience, you should have happy web developers being able to contribute to your native app and happy native developers not having to write out every single one of these pages. And that's it for my demo.
Awesome, Josh. Thank you. That's really cool. I remember the first time you showed that with me, and I could not tell the difference between which piece was native and what was web. And
that's the idea.
We're working in this space daily, and I was stumped. So
it hits even more when you realize it isn't just something that we're creating, right? Mm-hmm. This is something that exists. Lots of large companies and tech companies are depending on this.
Absolutely.
And us being able to create portals and bring this to a wider audience is very exciting.
Yeah, love it. All right, so let's go back to our deck and wrap things up. Okay, great. So let's just summarize what we learned today, and we'll get into our Q&A. So ultimately, why should you take a look at Ionic Portals if you've got native mobile apps that you're maintaining today and want to move faster and reuse web content in them? Well, as we talked about, the whole goal of this and the benefit is accelerating your development by working in parallel with your web and native teams. So ultimately, you can double your mobile output or better in terms of the velocity and moving quickly and shipping features to your end users, which is a huge win for all mobile teams and really any development team in all companies today, regardless of what your use cases are, of the apps you're building, the audiences you're serving. It's always a good thing to be able to go faster. And additionally, you can reuse these existing web experiences like Josh showed us to build those compelling seamless native to web transitions and things like that, and ultimately connect your existing web and native infrastructure together. You have these two, up till now, disparate pieces of your tech stack. Let's bring them together in one holistic way. You can unlock the power of your existing web developer talent. You have these existing developers building apps and sites for you already. So why not leverage them and partner with them to do more? You automatically have a great way to increase your pool of mobile talent. Increase your pool of mobile talent without having to spend months and months and months and all this money and time trying to hire native mobile devs. There's really no need. You have that have these folks right in front of you. And remember, the whole goal of this is really to leverage each team's strengths to drive innovation in your applications. It is not a replacement of your native team or your native team skills. It's an addition. It's leveraging both of your team's strengths for this. So think about it as, if you're a native developer watching this, it's really all about freeing up a lot of your time to not have to take something that's been built on the web and recreate that in native. That's really boring, right? And not, from that developer's perspective, just not very fun. And also for the business side, right? It just means that you're not innovating and you're not creating something new. You're having to re-implement someone else's work. It's just not efficient. So what's great about this is, as a native dev, you can partner up with your web devs and use their existing content that they've built, and that'll freeze you up to do an experiment and build more innovative features that are really made for your native talent. So it's the best of both worlds from that side. And the benefit, of course, for the web team is you can extend your skills from mobile and get the more bang for your buck in terms of the great software you've already created. And then finally, Ionic Portals is fully enterprise ready, backed and actively maintained by the Ionic team. We've got years and years of experience with our team of mobile and security experts building these products, working with hundreds and hundreds of customers over the years. So we definitely know this space really well. It's entirely what we're focused on. Ionic Portals is ready to deploy in minutes. It makes for a great POC. You can just drop it into your native app and give it a try. And should you need enterprise-grade support, we're here for you. Again, we have support, advisory offerings, training, really code reviews, all these different types of things to help you make sure that you're successful using Portals or any of our other products. Just a brief mention that I talked about earlier is the live updates feature. This is coming really soon. And this allows you to send live code changes directly to users. So think about where you have a really game-breaking bug like users not being able to log in, and you need to ship that as fast as possible. It's no longer acceptable to have your app broken and down for days at a time. You need to fix it immediately, not only for your user satisfaction, but oftentimes you can be losing revenue with every hour that the app is down. So this allows you to bypass those App Store review requirements and get those changes into their hands immediately. You can also do cool things like test new features, maybe opt into beta channels, and let them try out upcoming features, really the sky's the limit there. And again, this is App Store compliant because we're just updating web content and images. This is allowed. If you have native, the native code has to be updated, then that needs to go through a regular build and release cycle through the app stores. But for our web experiences, we'll be able to do this with portals. And we'll be able to, with the live updates, you can update an individual portal. So if you have, as Josh showed, 3 different experiences, 3 different apps, you can target just one of them or 2 or all 3. Really, again, the sky's the limit there. So you get really fine-grained control over what gets updated. And last, again, Portals is free. So give it a try today at ionic.io/portals. You can sign up and use it immediately. The whole product is free. And we also, again, have, for those that need support, we have our enterprise offerings and packages there that you can kind of take a look at. Cool. So with that, let's get into some Q&A. Again, reminder, drop your questions over in the side there. I see some coming in. And be sure to check out Ionic Portals. I'm going to bring us over here, Josh. Perfect. Looks like we're good. And I will drop my mouse. So yeah, let's start with some of our questions. So Josh, being our expert, I'm going to put a lot of this on you.
I'll do what I can.
Good one. Really good one. So can Ionic Portals be used to start transitioning a React Native mobile app to better capitalize on web assets?
Love this question. I've had a lot of discussions on this. Out of the gate, we did not target React Native. We targeted specifically iOS with Swift and Android with Kotlin and Java, but it is absolutely on our roadmap. And this is probably the 4th or 5th time I've received this question from React Native teams, and it is not something we have today, but it will be coming.
Nice. Yeah, I love it. It makes sense. I mean, we know, again, from working in this space for so long, React Native is popular for a reason, right? React is probably the #1 web framework out there and library, depending on what you call it. And so, yeah, you have lots of React Native apps and other cross-platform solutions. So, yeah, the core idea, it's not specific to Ionic or, pure native in this case, the traditional native by any means.
Yeah, and as you saw from my code, I'm a fan of React as well. But
Mm-hmm.
I like my
oh,
React.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I like my React with capacitor and portals.
Yeah, so of course we recommend building with React and then using our capacitor tool, which allows you to build native apps. If you don't have traditional native apps, that's a different approach too. Yeah. But great. Another question. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it does make a lot of sense though for someone who's already done the investment in building out their application with React Native. Being able to bring in portals to start augmenting pieces of it using the same React team and the experience they already have, I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm looking forward to delivering it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's why we've embraced everything in the web ecosystem: Angular, React, Vue, regular JavaScript, because there is no one #1 bulletproof solution. All of them have their advantages and disadvantages. And so, and it just so happens that React happens to be very, very popular. So why not, right? Great. Another question relates to security and authentication. So I know I touched on this briefly, but can you describe what you can do with sharing authentication info between portals and between native and web? Is there any limits to that, or is that possible to keep?
Absolutely. And this is like one of the primary scenarios we hear for portals is people want to embed web content into their native application, and they don't want to have the user log in again, right? They want to keep the same session open. So what you can do is once someone is logged into your native application, you can take that session token and you could pass it down through the initial context or through a plugin to the portal. So the portal can use that information to validate and make its own XHR or fetch request to gather data. So very common scenario. We expect people to use it a lot for that.
That makes sense. Absolutely. That's good to hear. Definitely fits into our mantra of just providing those seamless transitions and making sure that
you
you can
don't
do
want
that,
to have
you
to have
know?
a user login again. That's almost like a worst case scenario.
Yep. Yeah, I remember building apps back in the day with Cordova and having to, often do that with in-app browsers or OAuth flows. And yeah, it's painful because you just know that it's not the best experience and it's likely to confuse users, if not, really can cause drop-off rates in terms of
Exactly.
activity, right? Just like with websites, if they're not fully interactive as quick as possible, you run a lot of risk of losing them,
For sure.
especially in today's world. So great. Looks like another question related to our plugins and features out of the box. So what kind of features like that around the native device features does Portals offer?
Yeah. So right
You're
now,
touching now.
we depend on the capacitor plugins for this.
Mhm.
So all of the capacitor core plugins that have been developed by Ionic are available as plugins for Portals that you'd be able to make use of. So let's talk about you can probably help me augment this a little bit, Matt, with the number of them. But
Yeah.
there's camera, there's geolocation, there is app info, there is what else is there? There's a lot more.
Yeah, like notifications are a big one. I'm cheating over here. Make sure I don't forget anything. Like toast operations, the little pop-ups for data or for informing users of a change, they're temporary. Keyboard, haptics, file system, dialogues. Yep, all that
Mini.
stuff.
Yeah.
So,
And then again, anytime we add additional functionality to those plugins for capacitor, they'll come directly into the Portals ecosystem as well.
yeah, that's a win-win for both sides of those user groups. Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think we have time for one more. So let's see. Yeah, any other we got a really good one that just came in. Thank you for the question out there. I want to move our native apps to Ionic. How do we get started? Can our native app code be copied into the Ionic framework to speed the transition? Any recommended best practices for finding Ionic developers? So that's a lot of good questions. Let's take a step back. So you want to move your native apps to Ionic. Can you do that? So I'll start with some of this, Josh. So how would we get started? And can you copy your native app code? Well, the approaches are really different. So the traditional Ionic apps, or now the capacitor tool we're talking about, is a native app runtime. So it allows you to take your web app, and that can be built with any framework or web technology, even going back to jQuery or really anything. You add capacitor to that project, and then with some tooling, much like Cordova, if you've heard of that, but a more modern approach, it allows you to build iOS and Android apps from that code base. And then it's kind of like having one portal where it's just that one web experience.
Definitely.
One web app drives the whole thing. That's actually, that's a good way to put it. So could you transition your native apps to Ionic? Yes and no. You'd have to really, I would say, Josh, you'd have to really recreate a lot of functionality back in the web side. And then maybe, depending on the native device features you're using, you could create what we call plugins, which allow you to do some of that web to native data sharing and message passing. But honestly, I would say probably Portals might be the better approach if you have existing investments, right?
For sure. And look, you're not going to replace your entire native app day one, right? You're not going to do that. That's too much of a sink in cost and time. But there are going to be cases where you want to add additional functionality to your native app or upkeep. What you can do is choose pieces of that native app, either new development or existing development, and piece it off as a portal and allow for web developers to contribute to that particular portal. And as it goes over time, you could potentially piecemeal out your entire native application into a single portal in that way, and you would transition most of your UI to web. But it's really on a case-by-case basis. But there is an opportunity for doing that with Portals.
Yeah, I would say if you had an outsourced team of native devs and now you're maintaining it, embracing the web at first, then that could make sense as well. But otherwise, I would even try a POC with Portals and see if that gets you along the path, as Josh said.
Definitely.
The other part of that question is best practices for finding Ionic developers. And the good thing here with using Ionic's tech is it's made for any web developer. While you don't really learn Ionic like you do other technologies in the development space. Of course, there's the tools and other things. You do learn some of it in that sense. And if you use our Ionic framework, which is our set of mobile components that, recreate iOS and Android looks and feels and animation and gestures, you reference those APIs and those components and drop them into your app. But what's great is when if you're serious about this, or you're looking for more developers, you don't necessarily have to search for Ionic developers. You can hire any web developer, and they'll be able to get up to speed with our tooling really relatively quickly. We have lots of tutorials and demo apps to look at online on our site. Ionic.io is a great starting point for that. But yeah, what's great, and I love saying that, is you don't necessarily need to find a quote unquote Ionic developer. Find one that's great, like a React developer, Angular, more so like in that framework space, or just a general great web developer that's up to speed with modern practices, and you'll be fine. They'll be off to the races really quickly. All right, we had one great last question, because I think this is awesome, related to the session handling, is can you access a login application via the portal and then use the session token in the outer app? So my understanding is, can you log in with a web-based portion and then send that session token to the native side? Basically the other way around, where instead of like maybe you log in with native and you sent that data to web, can you go back and forth?
For sure. It's
Nice.
very similar. You would just drop a portal in for the login experience. For the information that comes back, you would grab that token. You would call into a plugin or use the Portals plugin to throw up an event, capture that from native, and you've got it.
Awesome. Perfect. Yep. Love it. Okay, I think that's all we have time for today. So thank you again, everyone, for the questions and for attending. Again, give Ionic Portals a try at ionic.io/portals. And again, I'm Matt Netkow for Ionic, and Josh Thomas as well. Thank you again. Until next time,
Thank
take
you.
care.